I think the Kennedy family is just a topic of fascination to so many people, including myself. I've read many books about him through the years. And as a writer, it's a challenge to try to find a new way of getting at this topic that would be, intriguing for readers and also provide some more information and insights that hasn't been out there before. So that was my challenge. And, there's a real, there's so many stories there. And by approaching it, by looking at a certain location or building or church or apartment, where they lived, each one of those has a story behind it. And a lot of the stories haven't been told before. That's what I tried to do, is just bring people that are interested, some new information and hopefully some new insights into these people that everybody's so fascinated with.
So tell me a little bit about John, the life he had, how he grew up, certainly, and also Jackie Kennedy and her world as well.
Well, I tried those people I really focus on. I really focus on as much as possible President Kennedy, Jackie, John. I'd be remiss if I didn't say, though, that the family never called him John. That was a media creation that he wasn't all that crazy about. But like everything in his situation in life, he had to live with it. And, he was actually famous before he was even born. So he grew up in the spotlight. But, on the cover of my book is a photo of him on his first day as district attorney in 1989. And he's down there waiting in the subway station, just like every other New Yorker would. And he really endeared himself to New Yorkers because here's this very famous guy that would be, seen in Central Park playing football with his friends or playing Frisbee. He'd be biking around in his suit and tie, on his way to work, and just trying to live as normal a life as he could, given the extraordinary circumstances into which he'd been born. And really, what I do in the book is in examining where people lived and where they chose to live, and what insights you can draw from that. Of course, John was raised on Fifth Avenue, across from the Metropolitan Museum. But as an adult, once he got places of his own, he had two places on the other side of Central Park, on the west side. And then he lived downtown in Tribeca after that, starting in around 1990. He never chose to live on the Upper East Side where he had grown up. And of course, if you know New York City, the west side is on the other side of Central Park, but it's quite different sociologically and culturally from what you find sort of the more wealthy old money world of the East Side. And then he lived downtown in Tribeca, which stands for Triangle Below Canal, which was an emerging neighborhood at that time. Now it's one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in New York. But, more of a sort of a downtown guy, and loved hanging out down there in the bars and restaurants. And so he was sort of setting his own course, different than what the environment he was raised in. As for Jackie, she really, it's amazing. She lived almost all of her life in New York in a very small radius around Central Park and Park Avenue. As a child, she was raised in various apartments on Park Avenue, including 740 Park Avenue, which is probably the wealthiest address in Manhattan, if not maybe in the entire country. That was a building actually designed by her grandfather, who was named James T. Lee. But Jackie had a very tumultuous childhood. Her parents didn't get along. Her father was about 15 years older than her mom. Black Jack Bouvier, we're talking about here, who had a reputation as being a drinker and a womanizer and so forth. So as a result, Jackie lived in several different places in New York growing up. Had a rather, the parents were always arguing. They'd sort of go back and forth. Both her and her sister kind of preferred the company of their father to their mother. The mother was very strict and was accused at times of actually being abusive towards them. The father wasn't exactly father of the year material, but he was. But they liked him a lot. He really went out of the way to always entertain them and be supportive of them when they could. You may remember the story when JFK and Jackie got married. her mother, Janet, kind of schemed to see that her stepfather, Hugh Auchincloss, would walk her down the aisle rather than her father, Blackjack, which as Jackie wanted. She wanted her Blackjack to walk him down, but she kind of schemed that he would not be able to do that. And when she later married Onassis, Janet told a friend, she's finally getting even with me for divorcing her father.
I've had the honor of working at 1010 Wins since 1996 in New York. So, you get to know the city, the people, and you're right, the various areas and how people think in one area or the other. But it seems like the Kennedys kind of, as you say, they kind of crossed all lines. And I didn't see them necessarily, everybody knew they had money, but that was about it.
Well, by all accounts, John Jr. was he treated everybody the same. He was very, people that worked with him, like at George Magazine, just the secretaries and, just regular people that he worked with. He tried to be as normal as possible and set people at ease as much as he could. It's really quite an extraordinary, just given the name that he had. And the way he grew up and being so famous, it was really I think he sort of got that he was living in a rather absurd situation. There was a movie called I believe it's called The Game with Michael Douglas that came out in the 1990s. And the whole thing was, the premise of it, not to go into the whole thing, but everybody was play acting, sort of setting up situations so that certain things would happen in this guy's life. He was just sort of, everybody else was, playing a role, but he didn't really know it. And John told somebody, hey, that's my life. I can relate to that, because it was almost like he was a character in his own story, I think.
It's interesting, a lot of these things come up. Tell me what you found the most exciting. I mean, I can ask you about different things regarding New York and things from the book, but if we only have a few minutes, tell me two of the most exciting and interesting stories that you want to share with us.
Well, as far as JFK goes, I was just astonished. I found two stories that I don't think appear in any of his biographies of him ditching his Secret Service to go out in Manhattan at night. There was a club called Raffles that was in a penthouse apartment on the roof of a place on West 57th Street. It was kind of like a private club for very wealthy people. And according to George Plimpton's then wife, he and George and her and JFK snuck out from the Carlisle Hotel one night and went over to the Raffles Club and were just hanging out. And then they actually took a cab home to home, as he was staying at, where they left him at his sister Jean and her husband Steve Smith's apartment. But you can just imagine the expression on, this was about a month before Dallas too. You can just imagine the expression on the cabbie when he sees the president get out. Obviously, today we'd be horrified at that. But I found another case, again, I think I might be reporting it for the first time, at least in modern times. Similar situation. Henry Fonda had an apartment on East 74th Street. JFK was at the Carlisle, wasn't that far away. And he just ditched his Secret Service agent one night and went out to this party that they were having. So, I think all presidents, they often say what a lonely job it is. And somebody who was such a sociable guy like JFK was, he really enjoyed being with people. He really enjoyed gossip. He enjoyed going to parties when he could. But a lot of that's cut off when you're president. So he was doing what he could to sort of, I think, keep a little bit his, a little bit of normalcy in an extraordinary situation. Of course, we hear those stories today. We're horrified, given, especially after Dallas, but even a lot since then, it's ramped up. The level of security that presidents have that would be absolutely unheard of today. Diana, I believe, said as much to John. She met with him at the Carlisle, sort of a secret meeting, even though they both walked into the Carlisle together. I believe this was summer of 1995, and he was talking about trying to get her to pose to be on the cover of George. But she was asking questions like that of how, how did you turn out so normal type of thing, I guess? Like, how did your mom do it, of raising children in these extraordinary circumstances. And she certainly had a challenge. And if you think about it, Brian, how many people can relate to that level of fame? Probably only a handful of people in the world, but certainly John was one, Jackie was one, and Diana was one. It's on a whole different level. And, it's interesting, when Diana died, both John and Carolyn Bessette, his wife, were very, very distraught about it. Of course, John knew her a little bit, but I think from what she told friends, Carolyn saw some of herself in Diana, and John too. And maybe when they saw that she was sort of a victim of her own fame, her own celebrity, because if those guys weren't chasing her through that tunnel, what happened probably wouldn't have happened. That maybe that was sort of a chilling thing for them, because maybe they saw their future there somehow. And if you think about it, he took up flying again to avoid being gawked at in airports and things like that. So in a strange way, it did echo in the deaths of John and Carolyn too. Maybe they sensed that when they saw what happened to Diana.
Tim English, I want to thank you for your time. It's a fascinating book, and thank you for taking the time to join us on the Dr. Brian McDonough Show. I really appreciate it, giving us this insight.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Brian, anytime.
That's great. Thank you.